The basics to building a fighter for a beginner in terms of character creation. I'm not going to give you anything that's optimized. I'm just going to give you the absolute raw and essentials. And then after that, it's up to you. Okay? Strength or dexterity should be your highest ability score because it's directly connected to how well you fight with a melee or a ranged weapon. What I will say is you need to decide, is it going to be strength or is it going to be dexterity? Okay? It's probably not a good idea to try to pick up both and max both out at the same time. It's probably not a good idea, okay, because you don't need to. It's wise to increase either your strength, if that's the one you're going to focus on, or your dexterity to 20 reasonably quickly, okay, because it does affect so much in terms of how your character operates. Constitution is your second most important ability score because it's related to how long your fighter survives in a battle, and your fighter might very well be in the front line. Fighters tend to be in the front line. So that means they're more likely to get hit and more likely to take damage, lose hit points. So you need to survive longer. Constitution will allow you to do that. Proficiency with the athletic skill, or which is actually strength-based. Now, if you're going to pick up proficiency in athletics, only do so if you're focusing on strength. If that's your primary ability score, then take athletics as your skill. Otherwise, you can pick up acrobatics if you have decided that your primary ability score is going to be dexterity. Pick up acrobatics because it's related to that. It's expected from a fighter because they're going to need to do a lot of grappling. They might get grappled. In fact, they probably will get grappled by a creature at some point, which means you need to be able to break out of that grapple. Otherwise, you're going to get killed. Okay, and you're also kind of expected as a fighter to be able to do physical tasks. And athletics and acrobatics allows you to do something that's physical, whether that is walk along a tightrope, move something that's very heavy, all those sorts of things. Athletics will come into that. Jumping, swimming, so forth. Decide what type of fighter you want. Do you want a close quarter melee fighter? If you do, okay, that's great. Your primary ability score would be strength, if that's what you're going to focus on only. If you've decided that your fighter is going to be a ranged fighter and do so at a distance and not be in the front line, then your dexterity modifier, your dexterity ability score is going to be your primary ability, okay? So if that's what you've picked up, that's what you're going for. Or if you've decided to go with a combination of melee and ranged, which you can do, then dexterity is going to probably be the one that needs to be your primary ability score. So there's a couple of things you need to think about in advance before you decide whether you go primary strength or primary dexterity. After that, fighting styles for the fighter are important. Figure out which ones are going to work for you. If you're going to go with a fighter that's going to use primarily ranged attacks, take the archery fighting style. If you've decided that melee or close quarter combat is what you want, then you're going to take something like two-weapon fighting or great weapon fighting or the defense fighting style or even the dueling fighting style. Each of these does something different, okay? Two-weapon fighting means that you can hold two light weapons in your hands and fight fairly effectively. And in combination with other things such as feats, it will make it even more effective. Great weapon fighting means that basically you can use two-handed weapons more efficiently than normal. Defense means that you're more defensive. Okay, in other words, you're concentrating on your armor. And dueling is more about using one weapon really effectively in one hand. Okay, as if you are dueling in the south of France behind the stables while nobody's looking. If you want to wear heavy plate armor, such as plate armor, the maximum armor that you can get in the game, okay, if that's what you want, you will need to have a strength score of 15 to meet that requirement. This is going to be probably more suitable to a character who has selected strength as their primary ability score. Yep. If you want to wear medium half plate armor, you will want your dexterity score to be about a 14 to benefit from the bonus. Anything higher than that it's kind of a waste. There is a requirement in terms of strength on half plate armor as well, if I remember right, but in terms of trying to benefit from that dexterity modifier, you probably want something like that. Otherwise, you're kind of losing out. Now, there are plenty of fighters that have been run in the game for Dungeons & Dragons 5e that do not wear plate armor or half plate armor. They wear breastplate, okay, which is medium armor. And that's perfectly fine. That gives you the best of both worlds. You get a reasonable armor class, you get plenty of mobility, and you can avoid some of the pitfalls that heavy armor offer. And so there is a good argument to be said that you don't always have to be wearing plate armor or half plate armor. The best feats for a fighter will generally be alert, because alert means you are less likely to be surprised. You get a better chance of being higher in the initiative because of alert. Gives you a +5. The crossbow expert, if you want to sort of specialize in the crossbow and at ranged attacks. Dual wielding, that feat is great if you want to go 2-weapon fighting. Okay, you probably want to use that in combination with the fighting style 2-weapon fighting. So dual wielder is good for that. Great weapon fighting, should I say great weapon master. Probably not something you want until about level 4, and it works pretty well if you are using a weapon that is being held in 2 hands. Heavy armor master. Now, it seems like that might be a bit odd, but under the right circumstances, it works pretty well as well. I mean, the reality is this particular feat works pretty effectively at low level. If you're winding up in a game that goes to mid-range to high level, it's going to be less useful to you. Lucky is always useful to any class because you get to re-roll 3 dice, essentially. Okay. Martial Adept, also a very good feat for a fighter, depending on what you want to do. Mobile is great for a fighter if you want to get in and out of the battle, melee, or close quarter combat, or you want to move around the battle, around the enemy front line to the back line and hit the big bad or the wizards that are throwing fireballs at you. Pole Arm Master, great because you get a longer reach with the weapons that you're using. Sentinel, probably more useful at level 4 in combination with something like Pole Arm Master if you've already got that. Otherwise, Sentinel really doesn't become useful until about level 8 when you get the opportunity to pick that up. Sharpshooter, excellent feat. An absolutely excellent feat if you are going with something like ranged attacks, because you get to get rid of that disadvantage at long range with your shots. You get to get past all of the penalties of cover, and there's a bunch of other bonuses as well that you can use with this feat that simply need to be selective when you use it. That's essentially what I want to say. Okay, tough means you get more hit points. So again, pretty useful for a fighter. More hit points is always useful. That pretty much covers everything I have to say.